So here we are at the beginning of the year 2020, and it's the time of the year when I deliver what I do annually, what I call the State of the Church sermon. Just like the president gives a State of the Union address about our nation, I kind of talk about where we've been as a church and where I see God leading us. So that's what today is. It's not a typical sermon where we're taking a passage out of the Bible. We're just kind of having a little conversation here about where we see God at work in our church here at First Christian Church. This past year, 2019, our theme was Hanging on Every Word. And it was a year when we preached through the Bible, different passages, as we were taking the challenge of reading through the Bible cover to cover. And so each week I would pick a different selection from a passage from our reading. And so we were exposed to many different parts of the Bible throughout the year here from the pulpit. And just because it's 2020 doesn't mean we put the Bible away. In fact, as we use it to build upon when we get into our new theme, which is a welcome sight, which I'll talk about in just a minute. But just thinking about 2019 here is just talking with you as a church family. Some accomplishments. We met a very tough budget, plus we raised money to complete the new roof. Things went on pretty much in our church without missing a beat. We're kind of in this rhythm. Things are kind of status quo. We didn't add a lot of new things, but we just kind of kept things going as it's been going. One thing I really appreciate, though, is that our reputation as a church in our community is very, very positive. We don't have anything to be embarrassed about, where our reputation reflects the Lord and gives our glory back to Him. And so many pastors have to spend time putting out fires in the congregation, just problems that come up that are so unnecessary. But instead of putting out fires, I don't have to do that. I get to just fan the flames and just let the Holy Spirit work. And I believe that over the last several years here, that's what I've been doing. And I see God at work, and you guys are just one of the most amazing congregations around. And it is truly an honor to be your pastor. So I just want to say thank you for making my job easy and such a delight. I love being here and seeing that we can serve God together. For this year, 2020, I chose as a theme verse Matthew 5:8. It's where Jesus is speaking in the Beatitudes, the Sermon on the Mount, and he says, "Blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God." If we want to see God, what does it take? According to this verse, it takes what? You're right, a pure heart. It takes a pure heart to see God. We don't see God with our eyes. We see Him with our heart. And it needs to have a heart that's full of purity. And so I think that that's what our goal can be this year, is to see God more clearly. And to do that, we need to have a pure heart. When we think about the numbers 2020, there's another meaning related to eyesight. And so if we made it our goal to not just think about our eyes, but think about, can we really see Jesus more clearly with our heart? Wouldn't that be a great thing to keep in mind as we move through this year? And so based on that, I chose the phrase, a welcome sight, because we really want to see Jesus more and more. There's an old song that says that if we see Him more clearly, we love Him more dearly, and to follow Him more nearly. And I think that's the way it goes. When we see Him clearly, then we love Him more dearly. And when we love Him more dearly, we want to follow Him more nearly. It's a natural progression. And so I really hope that by seeing Jesus more through this year, that we will be able to grow in those things. Today, I'm going to give you some information about this coming year, but I'm also going to give us a challenge. And when I give us a challenge, it's not to say we failed or been doing terribly or that we need to leave here discouraged or feeling guilty or ashamed. It's not that at all. It's just so that we can say, hey, I think there's a goal that we can obtain this year. And if we work towards that, then I think that would be something God wants from us. So anyway, a little bit of information, a little bit of challenge. That's what we're doing here today. When we think about my job is to help us as a church to be able to worship and to serve and to grow. Actually, worship, grow, and serve in that order. Because when we worship Jesus, we grow in Him and we're able to serve Him. And if we're all doing those things, that's what's important. And my job is to intentionally help us to all do that better and more. And so, Welcome Sight is what I've chosen to help us learn more about Jesus so that we can worship him, we can grow in him, and we can serve him. Even though we're going to be learning a lot about Jesus this year from the pulpit, we're not going to spend a lot of time in the Gospels studying his life, but we're going to go to some of the other parts of the Bible that talk about the essence of who Jesus is and what his purpose is and what are the theological foundations of the Son of God and what does that mean to our lives today. So starting next Sunday until Easter, we're going to dive into the New Testament book of Hebrews because it's a great explanation of who Jesus is and why he's so important. Now, this was a book written to first century Jewish people, Hebrews, explaining to them how Jesus is a fulfillment of everything that they knew about God from the Old Testament. And today, even though we're not a congregation really of Jewish first century Christians, we also can see through the book of Hebrews how the Bible ties together, how all the things that led up to Jesus were fulfilled in him. And we're going to look at some great illustrations and symbolism and help us to understand who Jesus is and how it's connected with the big picture of faith. And so I hope that we can dive into that and be able to learn a lot about the mysteries of who the Son of God is. And then from Easter until the end of May, I'm going to revisit a sermon series that I preached over 6 years ago when I very first came here to this church. I did a sermon series on salvation. I just broke it down. What does it mean to be saved? And what has God done for us through Jesus Christ to offer us this great gift of salvation? And I went through all these different things over about a 2-month period. And back then, I didn't know the congregation very well, and you didn't know me very well. But I feel like today, that would be a great topic to revisit, especially because after we've taken a look at who Jesus is, let's take a look at more closely at the gift that he's given us. That's another welcome sight, to be able to get that gift. And so we're going to spend some time going back. I'm going to revamp that series in a way that will help us to understand just what he has done for us. And then when we get to June, we're going to take it a step further. Not only has he given us a lot, but he wants us to share that with others. And I'm going to spend a couple of weeks talking about how we have a vision for the world, especially the world that goes beyond our own little world here. You know, we're a small town church in God's big kingdom. And so what is God's big kingdom? What's going on there? And so I'd like to spend a couple weeks and maybe even just spend kind of like a weekend, maybe a Friday night and a Saturday night, kind of doing a mini missions conference. We've not done anything like that since the years that I've been here. And I think it would be so awesome to spend some time learning about what God's doing around the world. And I've got a contact of a person, a good friend of mine who is involved in world missions, has traveled all around the world and could come back and just share with us some awesome stuff about what God is doing and how we can be a part of it, even from where we're at. And so I would love for us to be able to take a little break and look at how we can have a vision for the world. And as a former missionary, this is one of those topics that excites me to no end. Because it's really neat to see the gospel going to places where it's new and God is doing some awesome things that's never been done in those parts before. And so we'll hopefully do something like that. Maybe we'll tie in some meals with foreign food. I don't know exactly what it's going to look like yet, but I would love for us to spend some time doing that. And then as we move into the middle of the summer, I want to take us through a sermon series that I'm creatively calling it I Problems. Okay, up on the screen you see it's EYE problems, but really it's an I problem, and the letter I, problem. It's kind of the little pun on the vision thing here, but there are some things that keep us from having a pure heart. And that's what we want to take a look at. And so we can make sure that we're not falling into these things that would keep us from seeing Jesus more clearly. Things like the lust of the eyes, which is materialism. Things like lust of the flesh, which is sexual immorality. Things like the pride of life, which is self-centeredness. And then when we refuse to guard our hearts, it means we're letting the worldly influences of Satan come in and keep us from the truth. And so we're going to take some time looking at those things. And then from the August through till we get to Advent, we're going to jump into something that I debated back and forth whether to do or not. But I'd like us to go take these several months and go through the book of Revelation. Not because we're going to try to figure out how all the newspaper headlines match up with what's going on in the world today, because that's kind of a vain thing to do that it doesn't end up in anything, because actually every generation, even the first generation that read John's letter of Revelation, thought that it was describing their lifetime. So every generation thinks it's theirs, and I'm not smart enough to unlock the whole mysteries of what all these things mean and how it applies to us today. But the thing is about the book of Revelation is that the full title of the book is called The Revelation of Jesus Christ. Although we throw off the Jesus Christ part, we just call it the Revelation. Well, revelation is what? It's a revealing of something. And if the book is about a revealing of Jesus Christ, then I think there's a lot that we can learn about Jesus in this book. In fact, this is talking about the second coming of Jesus. We just had Christmas time where we talked about the first coming of Jesus. He's going to come again. And so this book prepares us to understand what it is like for Jesus to come again. And so we're going to spend several months looking through the book of Revelation. And it's quite a feat to jump into that, but I believe we can do that together, and I think it'll be a very rewarding time. When it comes to my job as preaching and teaching, and I've shared this before, but I share it again. I'm very intentional about what we're doing here at the church. And if you look at this chart up here, you see knowledge leading to faith, which leads to character, which leads to action, and back to knowledge again. And everything we do at this church, and every sermon I preach, I'm thinking, which of these categories does it fall in here? And I'm thinking very intentionally about how to help us to grow. And this chart is a phenomenal insight into how to do that. So for example, let's talk about faith. If I were to tell you need to have a deeper faith, and I just preached about having a deeper faith, would you really have a deeper faith? Probably not. If I told you to change your character, we're probably not going to do it, because we tend to think if people tell us what to do, we tend to just kind of like brush it off and neglect it. But the way this chart works is this. If I want you to have a deeper faith, then what I'm going to do, I'm going to go back to knowledge. If I give you more knowledge of God, that you understand how He works and who He is and what His ways are, then it makes you want to trust Him more and have faith in Him more. And the same thing with character. If we want to change from the inside out so that we are reflecting Christ in our internal nature, I could preach about it all day long, but if I help you to have a deeper faith, if we learn about a deeper faith, then it transforms us so that on the inside we're different people. And so it makes a difference there. And the same thing with action. I could tell you, go out and do these things, and you probably are not going to go out and do it. But if I can preach about things that's going to change your character on the inside, well, actions follow, right? So therefore, we see the change. And the same thing about knowledge. Knowledge isn't just about facts. It's about experience as well. And when we act, when we do the things that God wants us to do, we gain personal knowledge and experience of Him to where our knowledge increases even more. So you can see how this cycle just keeps working. And everything that I do as your pastor is to be able to help you and all of us to be able to grow in all of these different ways. And so that's what I want us to be able to do as we go through the years. I'm not just haphazardly picking from Sunday to Sunday, what am I going to talk about this week? There's a purpose to what we're doing here, and I'm glad you can be a part of that. And it all leads to a thing called discipleship. Discipleship is growing as a disciple of Jesus Christ, and that's what we want to do. And so that's my job as a shepherd, is to guide us in that process, and that's what we're going to keep doing here for another year, Lord willing. That's some of the informational. As far as the challenge goes, I really see over the last several months that we need to get serious as a church about a hole that we have in the church. We talked about fixing the roof. Okay, we fixed those holes, but we have a hole inside our church that needs to be fixed. What it boils down to is that there's a demographic across our land, even here in Arcola, people who are just spiritually blind, who can't see Jesus. Not necessarily because they don't want to, it's just they haven't truly seen Him in a way that they can respond to Him. And this demographic is basically two generations that we call millennials and Gen Z. Millennials are the generation that are roughly ages 23 to 38 years old. They're young adults. And Gen Z is the generation of college students and teenagers that we have now. And even though we have Koyo, our community youth ministry, we're doing a pretty good job with Gen Z, we're working with that. But we're also seeing in Koyo, there's not always a connection between helping kids see Jesus and helping them connect with the bigger body life of the church. It's not always happening as well as it could happen. You look around our congregations Sunday after Sunday, and do we see people in our congregation that are Gen Z and millennials? Not that many. We're glad to have some that we do. And if you're in those categories and you're here, that is wonderful. We are so glad you're here, but we're missing out on you. And, this roof that we put on is going to last another 50 or 60 years. It's going to outlast me and outlast most of us here. But are there going to be people in this building, using this building to worship and to grow and to serve? Are we passing on the baton to the people coming behind us? Are there going to be people in this building using it? Not because this church, this building is so sacred and we got to keep it full of people because of the building's sake, but we want the building to serve the people. Are there people in this community who need the Lord and can use this building as a resource to be able to worship and to serve and to grow? That's what we want to happen. And so we don't want this to all disappear with our generations. I'm a Gen Xer. I'm a stage above the millennials. But I see that behind me there aren't that many people following. And what can I do and what can we do to make sure that this is happening in our congregation? How can we attract them? Or maybe a better question is, why are we not attracting them? Now, it's easy to blame the millennials and the Gen Zs to say, well, they're just picky about this and that, and they've just got to have their way. And there's an element of truth to that. But we, as those who have gone before, need to do what we can to reach out to them, so that we can have a healthy church that will be a place that they will want to plug into, that their faith will be able to grow in. How are we going to reach more people in these demographics? I'm not really sure, totally. I'm trying to get a handle on that. But that's something we need to do together. That's something we need to do in unity and love and find the answers to be able to reach out more. As I was just jotting down some ideas, I wrote down 3 words, and I realized that those 3 words one started with a P, one was a Q, one was an R. And I thought, well, that's an easy way to get started on it, PQR. So P is prayer. We really have to pray, because younger generations are being so easily deceived by Satan, by the lies of this world. And that is one reason why we don't see them showing up here. It's not the only reason, but it's one reason. And we need to pray for them and pray for ourselves, those that are older, that will have wisdom to know how to guide and nurture them in their faith. So we need to really be praying about this, because it's a spiritual battle, one that we've got to enter into. Q was quick, because I thought we need to do this quickly. We can't just spend the next 3 to 5 years figuring out what are we going to do. We're missing people left and right, so we got to get going right away on this. And we want to proceed in wisdom and on good solid footing, but at the same time, we need to start moving. So we need to get some conversations going. We need to start discussing and, what can we do as a church to make ourselves a place where we can bring in more younger people. We got to be able to do that somehow. And R was just be real. All of the information and stuff I'm reading and studying about these two generations is that they really value people being honest. They don't want people to be fake. They want real is basically what they want. And so we have to do a better job at being real personally, and real, authentic people who follow in our convictions. And a lot of the young people, the reason they're not committed in their faith is because they've seen generations before them not be committed. They say one thing, but they do another. They're being hypocritical, or they're just really out chasing the American dream, or they're saying God should be first, but they're not living it. And so they have a point there. A lot of us have failed them. Not all of us have, and it is a perception issue, but we need to be real. Because when we're real and our faith is authentic, then that will attract them to the real Jesus. So, wherever we're starting at from this point on, think about PQR, and let's see what we can do to build upon that. We don't want to cater to the whims of any group of people, and you may be saying, oh no, are we going to turn the service into a rock concert or something? And I'm not saying we're doing that. I'm not saying we aren't. I'm not saying we are. I don't know. I don't know what we need to do to be able to make this community a place where they feel welcome and that they belong. But we're going to have to do some things differently than we've done before. It's really sad because not only are we talking about young people and teenagers, and it's easy to kind of blame them and, kind of make it a complicated thing, but we don't see that many kids in here either. Why don't we have that many kids? It's because their parents are millennials now. The millennials that are in their 20s and 30s, they're not coming to church, and they're not raising their kids to come to church. They're not raising them in faith at all. Where we're missing out. This thing is going to be like dominoes falling down, and pretty soon we don't have hardly anybody. And so you can see my urgency here is this, that I think this is our year that we get serious about this. And we become a congregation that will expand beyond who we are right now and reach out and do things differently in a way that honors God, but also brings in other people. We've got to do that. And I don't know yet what it takes. I don't have the answers. We're going to work together on this. And I think that together we'll come with the answers. But that's what we're going to do. We want to make sure that Jesus is a welcome sight to all them out there, and not just to those of us that are in here. So we've got a lot of prayer to do. We got a lot of thinking, conversations, lots of ideas. We're going to have to brainstorm and try some things differently perhaps, but in a way that will reach out. So I hope that we can get a vision for Jesus ourselves, because Jesus, he drew a crowd. No matter who they were, he drew a crowd. And I believe we can do the same thing as well. We can attract people to Jesus through our own lives as we worship him, as we grow in him, as we serve him. I hope you understand where my heart is in this, and I believe by some of the nods that you know that we've got to get serious about this as well. And we believe that God's going to do some great things. So we're trusting for that. So let's let Jesus be our welcome sight, and let's just do as this next song tells us to, and let's just love, love, love.